Well, I read through that handbook for the recently deceased. It says, live people ignore the strange and unusual. I myself am strange and unusual.
Coming to you on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
It's a strange hobby. Curious. Wouldn't it be better if you put her someplace? I've caused you some trouble.
The first Thursday of every month at 8 p.m. GMT and EST and 5 p.m. PST.
Are you mad at me? How mad at me are you?
The female perspective on all things paranormal.
I'll buy a cup if you buy a box of my delicious Girl Scout cookies. Do we have a deal? Are they made from real Girl Scouts?
From the East Coast to the West Coast, across the pond and the world beyond.
Captain Howdy said no.
Captain who?
Captain Howdy.
Who's Captain Howdy?
You know, I make the questions and he does the answers.
Oh, Captain Howdy, yes.
Nice.
Oh.
Not a psychiatrist, she needs a priest. She's already seen every psychiatrist in the world, and they sent me to you. Now you're going to send me back to them? Help her, just help her.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
It's time for Paradivas.
They're here.
Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to the monthly episode of Paradivas. I am your hostess of the ghostess, Marie Samuels, and with me is my co-hostess with the mostest, Marianne Donnelly. How are you doing tonight, Marianne?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
I am fantastic as well. Always love doing the show. Always love having conversations with you and our awesome guests.
Yes, we've had some good ones.
And we're only getting started, folks.
Absolutely.
We are only getting started. So did you get a chance to watch Winchester?
I did.
And I am so curious to know what you think.
Yes, I know that when we talked last time, you were not too excited about it. You were like, I wasn't real happy with it. And I went that night, I think it was, that I was going to go watch it. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to like it. Marie said she didn't like it, and I was real worried about it. But I thought it was very good. I thought the cinematography was fantastic. I don't think I had as much of a personal feeling of connection to it as you did, simply because I haven't been there. So I didn't feel as betrayed, I guess, that you might have. Mm-hmm. I thought the cinematography portion of it was very well done. I enjoyed all of that. And what percentage was accurate, that didn't bother me as much because I looked at it as a movie. And I appreciated all of the work that they put into all the features that were in it and the graphics and just that representation type. So as far as the storyline itself, I don't know what percentage would have been actually realistic. And I think that that's what you disliked the most. Is that correct?
Right, but I did say that it was an intriguing concept. Right? Like, I was like, mm-hmm. I like, even though it wasn't true to the story, to the actual story of Sarah Winchester, it was a clever addition to the story. And you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. At least part of it, right? I don't want to spoil it for too many people out there. But there is the one part that really bothered me, and I'm just spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Tune out for the next 30 seconds. It was the earthquake.
Okay.
That and her interactions with the spirits causing the earthquake. That was no. No.
Now, see, for me, I was excited that they brought the earthquake into it because the earthquake actually did happen out there and the building was affected by the earthquake. And I'm like, oh, look, they even put the earthquake into it.
Yes, but the earthquake did happen, and it was a true event, and it did affect the house.
Yes.
But was it caused by Sarah Winchester?
Right, yes. I understand, yeah.
But although, as I'm saying that,
put it in.
As I'm saying that, I'm thinking, Marie, it could very well have been caused by Sarah. How do you know? I mean, I'm just thinking of Mother Nature, right? I'm not. I'm
right.
Closing off all other possibilities. Maybe she did create the earthquake, and it's just something that we'll never know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the additions that they added to the story, like I said, I thought they were clever. It was interesting to watch. It was an interesting concept, but it did bother me that it wasn't completely true to her story and how she lived. That was so. You see where I'm coming from, right? Like I like
absolutely.
I like the concept. I like the idea. It was cool. And you're right. It's not like it was a documentary or a biography. So for them to take creative liberties and make some changes because it's a movie, well then so be it. That and maybe I just need to be more open-minded when it comes to movies, not documentaries or biographies.
The silver screen.
Exactly. Yeah,
because I think the same kind of thing happened with all of the Warren movies so far.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
With all the Conjurings, and they took creative liberties with those as well.
Yep, Amityville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's just the nature of the beast, and so I don't know. It just didn't bother me as much. I don't know.
So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being an awesome movie, 1 it being terrible, where do you rate it?
I'd say it's right up there at a 4. I thought it was pretty nice. Right. Like I said, I enjoyed the cinematography and the features that they put into it, and again, I liked the fact that they brought even in the fact that there was an earthquake into the movie. I don't know.
Well, when you go on the tour, the earthquake is a very big deal. As you go through the house, they show the portions of the house that's remaining that wasn't
affected.
No, that wasn't corrected after the earthquake.
Oh, okay. So
there's parts of the house where you can see the earthquake damage that was never fixed.
Nice.
Yeah. It's so that part, it's cool. It is cool that they put it in there. So yeah,
Okay.
I think our listeners out there should definitely give it a watch and come up with their own conclusions, of course. But overall, it was a good movie.
What was your number between 1 and 5 then?
I give it a 3.
A 3? Okay.
I'll give it a 3.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. 3.5 for the pair of Devas.
I wonder was it a 3.5 at Earthquake?
Gosh, I think it was much higher than that, but that would be hilarious if it was.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it was much higher than that.
I feel like Googling it.
So now let's get to tonight's guest. Joining us tonight is Marie D. Jones. She's the author of many books regarding the paranormal, metaphysical, and science-related topics, and she has her own production company. Marie D. Jones, welcome to Paradivas.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I get to be a diva.
Oh, you already are, honey. That's why you're on the show.
Oh, okay. Divas only. Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, and we're very, very glad to have you. You write wonderful books, huge menagerie of topics. Let's start there. What got you started in writing?
I was born a writer, I guess you could say. I was writing stories and from a very early age, telling stories, verbally. I honestly wrote my first book when I was 5. Didn't get published, but I wrote a book about living on Mars. And my mom, bound the cover in cardboard and yarn. And that's just been a part of my life since I can remember. And I started publishing my writing when I was a teenager and getting paid for it. So that was really exciting. I wrote short stories, I wrote video and movie reviews, and I wrote for a couple of magazines that would send me to movie premieres, and I'd get to review the movies. And then I started writing about the film industry, like pop culture. Then I started writing screenplays, and I wanted to write novels. That seemed to be like the last thing I ever did. Then I wrote like a nonfiction book just on a whim and got an agent, and I now am on, I think, my 18th or 19th nonfiction book, 2 novels coming out next year, well, one later this year. I've got screenplays that have been optioned. I have one that's been purchased, and hopefully will go into production by the end of the year. So it's just, that's all I've ever been doing, really. So it's not like overnight success. It's been a long haul.
I'll say, your entire life.
Well, it has. And the reason why I chose to become a writer, well, I actually didn't really choose it. I think it kind of chose me is because, like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a jockey. Still, that's like my first love, but I got too big. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a cop. I wanted to be this. I wanted to be that. And what I realized is that by writing, I could be all those things, whether I was writing about them in a fictional sense or whether I got to research them and write nonfiction books. And from early childhood, I was obsessed with UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot. I had no idea how I knew who Bigfoot was when I was like 4 years old, but who knows? My dad was really into that stuff too. And my dad was a geophysicist, so I kind of grew up thinking that science and the paranormal were, no big deal. They're compatible. So, yeah, it's a great way to explore every single thing that you're interested in and get to sort of vicariously live those subjects without having to, go to college and make them your life's work.
Right. That's wonderful. You're inspiring me to get back into it.
I get constantly. Now it's really kind of cool because I'll have people messaging or emailing me, what do I do? I'm a new writer. I want to write. And it's like, you just sit down and you write. There's really no secret. But the only secret I would say is that developing a really thick skin to be able to withstand the amount of rejection you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And, 90% of a writer's life is rejection. I don't care if you're writing for TV or film or books or novels or short stories or what have you, magazine articles. Most of it is rejection. And, yeah, when I was younger, I took that really hard. But then I started to realize, well, maybe for every 25 no's, you might get a yes. And then you start to get more yeses as time goes on. And I was talking earlier to a writer-director. We met for the first time, virtually on Facebook, and then we had a phone call. We were talking about this very subject that people think, oh, writing is so glamorous. Oh, my God, you're millionaires. And, oh, you wrote something and you sold it the next day. And it's like, are you kidding?
Mm-hmm.
So whenever anybody says, I really want to be a writer, I say, you damn well better make sure that, is there anything else that you can do? Because this is going to hurt, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and pain and suffering and rejection. But if you're really, truly a writer, you do it anyway. So.
Right. Now, you mentioned that you early on had interests in UFOs and Bigfoot. Did you have any experiences, paranormal UFO sightings or anything like that got you down that road, or were you just naturally drawn to those subjects?
From that early of an age, because, like I said, when I was 5, I wrote about Mars, and I was obsessed with outer space. And so the only thing I can think of, even though I was reading at a very, very early age, but the only thing I can think of is that now my dad, even though he was a scientist, was very interested in UFOs. And a lot of scientists were and still are, even though they may not openly talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a neighbor when I was growing up who lived across the street who was like a UFO fanatic. So I feel like maybe when I was that young, I must have heard conversations. There's no way I could have known who Bigfoot was. Who knows? Maybe there was a cartoon on or something. But I don't remember having experiences until I was a little bit older. Then there were things that happened that I thought were dreams that now, looking back, maybe they weren't in terms of in-your-face, really direct experiences. I've never had one, but I've had very indirect experiences. In other words, I've had situations where I've been in places and I felt such a repulsion, like I need to get out of here, I can't breathe, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And then you find out later that somebody was brutally murdered there. So those things have happened throughout my life. And when I was in my 20s, I saw, because I was involved in Center for UFO Studies, Fund for UFO Research, and MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, way back in the day. For a long, long time, I was doing research for them. I was writing articles and research papers. I had my own MUFON group here in San Diego. I co-ran a large group in Los Angeles. So during that time, I became very much aware of what to look for and how to discern natural phenomena or a military prototype or what have you from something that, other, put it in the other category.
Unidentified.
So the only time and the only time in my life I remember seeing anything that fit that was, I was, this is in La Costa, California, which is very close to where I live now. It's like the next town over to the east. It was not built up at all then. It was a lot of open space, and I was driving this dirt road, which is now a huge main road that goes through subdivisions. It was a dirt road. There was nothing around, and the apartment complex that I lived in was fairly new. It was like one of the newest things built, and I saw this thing. It was kind of almost dusk out, so I saw these 4 lights, like a square. Only the 2 back lights would then flip over the 2 front, and then the 2 front would flip over the 2 back. And I could tell that there was a solid object, in between, but that this thing was just flipping end over end over end over end. And there was a road, like another dirt road that you could take into the hills, but it was a truck off turn so that trucks could kind of bypass the main road. And it didn't go in very far. So I just went as far as I could, and I just really could not see anything else, and it kept going. But I just knew that's not normal. That is not something I have ever seen in my UFO studies. I used to read Jane's Defense Weekly just to see what military prototypes were being worked on and reported and tested, and it was nothing like it. And you just kind of have a gut feeling that you're seeing something weird. And I learned later, like time kind of slows down, and I learned later that there's a term called the Oz effect, where if you're seeing a ghost or a UFO or something out of the ordinary, time becomes very distorted. And, I didn't learn that until much later, though. I just, I had no association with that. So things like that, like, I'd go into a building that I had no idea that people had died there, and I just felt like, oh my God, that room is so negatively charged. I am not going in there. But I've never seen anything right in my face, unfortunately. I did have missing time. I had 2 hours of missing time on a freeway in LA. But just things like that, and it's very frustrating because, something's up, but you have not gotten that in-your-face apparition or alien abduction or whatever.
When you had the missing time, were you driving on the interstate?
Yes, and I told this story for the first time. I was on Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion, and you guys know who he is. His wife, Anne, had a radio show. They had a radio show, and Anne was actually interviewing me and a woman called Starfire Tor. That's the name that she went by. And we got on the subject of abductions and missing time, and I said, well, you know, I had 2 hours of missing time. I was in Glendale, in Los Angeles, in the Valley, on the 134 freeway heading east. I was going to JPL to see Carl Sagan speak. This was a while ago, you know, obviously long before he died. And he was like the keynote speaker for the Planetary Society, which I was a member of. And I had a ticket. I was so excited. Well, earlier that evening, some weird things happened in the apartment I lived in with my husband, my ex-husband. I couldn't get out. Every time I tried to open a door, whether it was the bedroom door going out to, you know, into the living room or the door to the apartment going out to the hall, I couldn't get the doors to open. I would open them and they would like pull shut, like somebody, you know, like there was a force not letting me go. It got to the point where my ex-husband said, maybe you shouldn't go. Something's probably going to happen to you. And I said, I am not missing Carl Sagan. There's no way in hell. I started driving. I was at the 134, and there's a junction to the 2. The 2 heads north into Sacramento or somewhere north. So I'm going east, somehow ended up on the 2 freeway, way north of where I should have been. 2 hours had passed. It was now dark out. And this was when we first had those big, bulky cell phones. You know, they look like big, giant, I don't know. You could kill someone with it.
Yeah.
They were huge, right? No internet, no GPS, no Google or Siri or anything. And I pulled over, and I knew that I was on the 2 because I could see the sign. It said 2 to, I'm trying to see if it was Fresno or Sacramento. Anyway, I'm heading way north. I don't recognize any of the exits, and I lived in LA for over 15 years in the Valley. Desperately called my husband from the side of the road. Panicked, just, you know, in a complete panic. I had no idea how I drove without killing myself or anybody else. He said, you need to just get off the freeway at the next exit, immediately look for the on-ramp for South 2, and then get back on the 134 West and come home. And I did. There was no way in hell that I was going to go see Carl Sagan after that. And I got home and I was terrified. I went to bed. I think we had a huge earthquake like that night or the next night, and never thought about it again. You know, I thought, well, maybe I was sensing an earthquake was coming. I never associated it with anything alien until I was on the radio show with Anne and Starfire, and they said, oh, that part of the 134 freeway is notorious for missing time and alien abduction. And I said, oh, really? And they were like, do you want to be hypnotized to see if anything happened? I said, no. No, as far as I know, I just blacked out and didn't kill anybody. And no, I don't want to know. But I never felt like there was something, you know, percolating just under the surface. It was just blackness. You know, one second you're here, the next second you're there. Mm-hmm. And 2 hours has gone by. But I never had that weird feeling that, oh, my God, I need to know what happened. I've got these weird marks on me. And before that, actually, many years before that, I had a similar situation in Claremont down here in San Diego. It was 11 o'clock at night. I didn't have missing time, but my car just stopped while I was driving, and my doors all flew open, and the car felt like it was lifting off the ground, and there was like a white light that I, at the time, equated to the street light. And the car dropped back down, the doors closed, I panicked, I went home, and never associated it with anything except maybe I hit something, and it caused all the doors to come open. So those are the things that have happened to me. They have never been direct. They've never been, oh, that's exactly what that is. It's always been these odd experiences that, you know, there was like I had no reference points for.
When you saw the white light, would you describe it as super bright, like super bright?
It was, but I have to tell you, and I was younger then when I had the missing time, because I was still living in San Diego. So I was a lot younger. I was probably late teens. And I had this was well before the abduction phenomenon had become known. Way before. I had no even thought in my mind at the time of anything like that. I was like, this car is like possessed, And I thought that bright light was just the street light, which is really odd because it was very bright and the street lights, they're not that bright. But it just goes to show you, when you're in the middle of an experience like that, you're sort of clutching for any kind of explanation. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, the first thing that came to my mind was I hit something and the car jumped. The car literally lifted off the ground. The doors flew open. Maybe they weren't locked. I mean, come on. I was like a teenager driving home at 11 o'clock at night. Those doors were all locked.
Right.
I mean, that's the first thing. I would lock the doors before I got my seatbelt on. There's just little things like that along the way that it wasn't until years later when I look back, I thought, oh, wow, I wonder. I was like, I don't want to be regressed and find out. I'm just going to let it go.
You don't think you'll ever do the regression?
I don't feel a pressing need to. I don't know. Larry Flaxman, who's written a number of books with me, a few years ago, he did a regression, like a past life regression. And he is a diehard skeptic. Okay, so he did it kind of to challenge his own skepticism. And what was really interesting is he was like, oh my God. He wasn't necessarily a believer when he came out the other end, but very close. And so I thought about it. God, should I? I mean, is it really something that I need to know? Has my life suffered by not knowing? But might it? And no, my life has been great. But would maybe knowing kind of screw me up? Instill fear that I don't really need to be there. I don't know. Maybe I will someday. But that's why I didn't think anything really interesting had happened, because I later, in talking to abductees, a lot of them said they knew they had missing time and they felt compelled to find out why, and they couldn't really understand why they felt so compelled. I didn't feel that. So I thought, well, then I must not have had a similar experience. I don't know. Maybe because I was the daughter of a scientist, I just sort of shoved it way down and, oh, no way, that's, that can't be it. Even though I was a total believer that those things were happening to other people, it's like, oh, yeah, well, they're not going to happen to me. I'm too much of a skeptic. But those kind of things, when they happen enough, even if they're spaced out, they keep you really interested in this field.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, listening to your story, I had a couple of thoughts come to my mind. And the first was that I thought when you said you called your husband when you had the missing time, and I thought for sure you were going to say, and he said, I told you not to go.
Oh, he did. Totally. I told you so came when I walked through the door. Seriously. But you know what? That was a real defining moment for me, because that showed me how strong your intuition can be, and your, and it can even almost manifest, I guess, in physical things.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, he even had to help me try to open a door. It was like, what the hell is pulling this closed? Is it stuck? And then it's like the next door. And it really, he jokingly said it, but he could tell I was in a complete panic. And I was more in a panic just because I was afraid I was going to be lost and, get raped and beaten up or something. Then, oh my God, I think I might have been abducted by aliens. That didn't even cross my mind. But after that, I started to think, wow, I should always be listening to that voice. And how when you don't listen to it, it gets louder and stronger. And how often in my life I never did. You'll hear people say, oh, that, on 9/11, they just had a weird feeling not to get on this plane. They couldn't really understand why. Now, some people ignored it and got on the plane and died, and others, who lived said, oh no, I always listen to my intuition. I always listen to my gut instinct or whatever. And it said, don't get on that plane. And I was not going to get on that plane. So that was a really valuable lesson in the power of whether it's outside of us or something within us, it kind of knows the future. It was like a precognitive little, warning.
Right. Well, I also was thinking that I find it very interesting, and you said yourself that you find that interesting as well, that you do not want to know about the missing time, because so many individuals do, and I find it interesting that you, who
I know,
are into
people,
this
right?
stuff, have no desire.
You know what's weird? Maybe it's because if I did it, I might find out nothing happened. So
and then be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is, let's say something happened. Now that's going to change my whole life, because then I'm going to be paranoid, right? Or I will go back and look at events that, like I had an encounter with Men in Black, which was a totally separate situation that was much later. I will go back and I will look at a lot of things that I probably just passed off as, a triviality, as being really important now in the context of this new information that I have. Now, since childhood, I have had continuous, repetitive, recurring dreams of UFOs landing and my needing to get my son to safety. And they are very foreboding, very terrifying dreams. I've had them since early childhood. First it would be getting myself to safety. Then when I had my son, it was getting him like in the house, locked down, shelter in place, we were being invaded. My son, when he was really young, used to talk about, being from another planet and all kinds of stuff like that I thought, oh, he just, imaginary friends, that kind of thing. So I can tell you that if I were to be regressed and they were to say something did happen, I could easily weave together so many things in my life that were related to that. If I were to find out nothing happened, yeah, it would be kind of a disappointment, but then my life wouldn't change. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I almost prefer to stay in the middle and not deal with either the repercussions from either one of those choices. I think if, maybe when I'm on my deathbed, if I feel really compelled to know, I'll tell the nurse, could I please be regressed really quickly? Or who knows? I mean, I might, it's really weird. Like the last few years, I've been really focusing on doing other things, and UFOs have always been my first love with the paranormal. And sometimes I step back and I'm not doing anything and I sort of disappear from the field. The last year, I felt increasingly compelled to get back in, to the point where, now today I'm almost at my old level of obsession and interest. And I find that interesting too, because maybe during this time of high interest, I will feel like I need to do that. So
That's
we'll
possible,
see.
Yeah.
But then I have to find somebody to do it, who's like really qualified, and I don't know. I'll put the word out on Facebook. Anybody want to regress me? I've gotten some really good contacts by putting stuff out on Facebook, but yeah, that's just, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, do I want to know A, or do I want to know B, or do I just not want to know?
Well, I can see why you would have such a strong desire with the background that you have and your father being a scientist to really get into and studying the UFOs, because I think that scientists look at us and say, well, we can't be the only ones out there. Clearly, there's probably something somewhere else in the universe, and why wouldn't they go on vacation and check us out too,
Exactly.
So
yeah,
I feel that that's kind of why you're more drawn to that, is because of your background.
I think so. And I just, I love telling stories when I was little, like even 3, 4, my grandfather would tease me. I found out later, because I was always like making up these giant fibs and lies about my brother and sister, and like telling stories about them, And he would tease me, "Oh, you're such a storyteller." And that really stuck with me. So I must have seen or read something, because we always went to the library when we were little, and I'd bring home stacks of books. And I know there was probably a Bigfoot, something, a commercial or something on TV that maybe I saw. And honest to God, when I was little, I must have been 4 or 5, I told my parents that I saw Bigfoot. We lived in New York. We lived in a sort of a semi-rural/suburban area, not in the city. It was north of the city. And we had a lake and forest behind our house. And so you'd see deer and you'd see rabbits and, whatever. Sometimes you'd see people walking back there going to the lake. But for some reason, I said that I saw Bigfoot back there. And it probably was just a neighbor. And just, in the trees, you can't really tell. So what interested me, though, is at that age, how did I equate somebody walking through the woods with Bigfoot, and where the heck did I hear about Bigfoot? Now, I don't know, and I'm probably never going to know. Maybe my dad was reading something, and my dad died a few years ago, so I can't really ask them. But the UFO part, I can, because my dad did have a lot of old UFO books around the house that I now own. Really old, like classic, UFO and the Three Men, and totally tattered, dog-eared books. But I was also telling ghost stories. So where the heck did that come from? I don't remember ever seeing a ghost when I was a little kid, yet I believed in them. I knew what they were. I made up my own ghost stories. So I don't know if that's if you're interested in science, because I really was as a kid, if that is a natural offshoot of being interested in the known world to also kind of recognize the fact that there is this unknown world. I don't know, but it's always been there.
Well, I have a science background as well, and so I've often gone to paranormal events, and I tell the Bigfoot individuals who are presenting and whatnot, yours is the only thing here that I truly actually believe in. I said, because really? As a scientist, I know that there's so many things out there that we have not yet identified. Just because we haven't seen them yet, to collect data on them doesn't mean they're not there. And they always find me so amusing.
Well, I mean, okay, I'll ask you, do you believe that Bigfoot is like some type of primate that a species we haven't discovered yet? Or do you entertain the possibility that it might be, along with a lot of other cryptids, maybe all of them, an interdimensional, I call them IDEs, interdimensional entity. In other words, there's something coming from another reality. Right. Which explains how erratic sightings are, how nobody can ever seem to really get a physical grip on these things, but they're showing up everywhere.
Personally, as a science person, I believe it's just when we haven't identified, we haven't collected a sample of yet. But as a paranormal type person, I have to believe that there's always the possibility of interdimension. I just really need the physical, so that kind of makes that harder for me to believe in.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But that it is always a possibility, and as a scientist, I never like to rule anything out either, because you never know what data you'll be able to collect eventually.
Right, and as we're learning more about the quantum world, the world at the subatomic level, and possibly if it can be extrapolated to the classical physics, those possibilities seem like they're becoming more and more openly discussed. Not discussed like, oh, that's disgusting. Discussed as in talked about.
Yes.
In case we're discussed. What? But one thing I found really, really cool is a few years ago, Michio Kaku, the theoretical physicist, who's written a lot about the paranormal and is very open-minded, he was on one of those ancient alien type TV shows. It wasn't Ancient Aliens. It was, Down the Rabbit Hole or one of those shows. And he said that he thought, yes, there is a possibility, I'm not saying it's the truth or it exists or that we can ever prove it, that the Bermuda Triangle could be a type of Earth-based wormhole. And I had never, ever heard a scientist of that caliber, like Carl Sagan and Stephen Hawking would talk about the possibility of alien civilization. Sure, it exists. Are UFOs? No. They were very kind of close-minded about that. And then other quantum physicists and theoretical physicists would talk about, yeah, there could be other dimensions, other realities, parallel universes, whatever. But he was the first person who ever mentioned something that we in the paranormal field all know about, the Bermuda Triangle. And he was literally saying that there may be a possibility of these sort of electromagnetic vortexes or points of energy or whatever, anomalous areas where things go awry, and that they might even be causing the disappearance of objects that maybe, who knows, appear somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that just blew me away when he said that. And that's when I started to think, oh, okay, so now maybe we can look at paranormal phenomena as not just existing in a physical sense in our world, but maybe kind of like this, popping in and out of our reality from their world. And that's why it's so hard to apply the scientific method to it, because it's not something physical and tangible that we can always, duplicate and study and replicate the exact same way we did the first 10 times. It's
right,
so inconsistent. Yeah, it's erratic and inconsistent. So I like that explanation, not that it's, factual, but it really does open the door for a lot of this stuff to actually exist, even though scientifically we haven't caught up to the how and the where and the why and the what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always say I'm open to finding anything out, but there's certain things that I just feel closer to. Things that I could feel that, that could really be,
Right?
So,
like, I can't stand it, and I hope I don't offend anybody, but I might. I can't stand watching those ghost hunting shows where every flippin' noise or flicker of a light is a ghost.
Yes.
No. You need to prove a little bit more to me that something, And so I think we all have that natural knee-jerk skepticism that we should have because it's very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are in a field where there is not a whole heck of a lot of physical definitive proof, it makes it even harder.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have that little corner of our mind that
just say
open
maybe.
To, science doesn't know everything yet. But as science advances and expands, that opens new doors for being able to say, oh, maybe this is what we're dealing with, and maybe this is where we need to look.
Absolutely.
And Marie, I'm going to ask you the same question that you asked Marianne. Do you think that Bigfoot is an undiscovered flesh and blood creature of this world, or are you more along the lines that it could be an interdimensional being?
I started out the physical, and this is the same thing with UFOs, okay? I started out believing in what's called the nuts and bolts explanation, that they're from here. And we're talking about the unidentified stuff, not the stuff that we find out is, Venus or something the local Air Force Base is testing or what have you, a misidentification of a cloud formation. I'm talking about the small percentage of things that really are just unidentified. I always used to believe the nuts and bolts. They're from this universe. They're completely physical in form. And, the only way we're going to prove it is if one crashes or it lands on the White House lawn and little creatures get out. Now, because my dad was a physicist and he wanted me to read up on quantum physics and theoretical physics, and we talked a lot about the multiverse theory and many worlds and parallel universes and, the possibility of other dimensions and, all of that stuff opened up the possibility to me that these are interdimensional, not to mention the fact that people like Jacques Vallée, who I really looked up to, and even John Keel were saying this a long time ago. that a lot of the sightings, even of ghosts, but mainly cryptids and UFOs, people will report them as looking like almost like holographic projections, something projected that, it's like from a movie theater projection onto a screen, and it flickers in and out of my vision, and then it just vanished. Sometimes you'll hear people say it shot through the sky and it shot off. So my feeling is we're dealing with everything. We are dealing with physical beings, physical entities. I think many cryptids are interdimensional. I think, UFOs, there could be 5, 6, 7 different types that we are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with ghosts and apparitions. Is every ghost the essence of a dead person? Might we not also be seeing someone who is alive in an alternate timeline? When we die, maybe what people are seeing is us in a parallel universe where we're not dead yet, or where we're carrying on with our life. So that opens up these huge doors for me where it's like, oh, this would explain a lot of the sightings that don't fit into that nuts and bolts door, right. I guess you could say. I also feel like if they were all physical, we would have, there's so many people out there hunting them now, whether for a TV show or their own, kicks, that we would have some definitive proof.
Yeah, I agree.
So that kind of tells me something, and I don't really know what. But that maybe they're not coming from here and returning to here.
I concur.
Can I prove it? No.
No, I know. Not yet.
Yeah, really. You know what's really lousy, though? Somebody could actually post a YouTube video of a Bigfoot manifesting, out in the forest, out of this some sort of weird vortex, running around doing its thing, then going back in. And 99.9% of the people would say, oh, you faked it. It's a fake video. It's not real. So even if somebody gets proof, what is our natural instinct? It's to say that's fake. A bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that weird?
It is, but you're absolutely correct. I mean, that would be my first thought if I, someone filmed a Bigfoot fading out and then disappearing. That would be my very first thought. It's photoshopped. It's
you
created.
faked it.
Yep.
Or a UFO landing on the White House lawn and little entities getting out. The vast majority of Americans would say it's a conspiracy the government wants us to believe to distract us from something. Right? It's a false flag or any number of things. And it's like, what is it going to take for there to be definitive proof where everybody would say that is exactly what it is? We might have already had it, and we might have already all thought it was a joke.
Well, as far as UFOs concerned, I mean,
human nature.
The government, I believe, has to have the corpse of an alien being.
I'm sure they've had many.
Now, Bigfoot, on the other hand, I think the only way that we would be able to prove that he exists is to actually capture him.
Have a dead body or catch one in a cage, right?
Yeah,
and then have genetically
him
tested.
Right.
Yeah.
And even then people are going to be skeptical. So,
Yeah. It's a man in a suit, or it's CGI, or...
Well, like the alien autopsy video, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people believed that. They believed that was the actual autopsy from Roswell from 1947.
Yeah. Yep. I could have maybe faked that. Well, maybe not me, because I don't know how to do that. But, somebody who's really good at makeup, theatrical makeup or something. But the thing is like, if somebody did have real video, the first thing that we're going to say, even if we're believers, is, oh, please. That's a bunch of, that's just ridiculous. That's not it at all. It's another hoax. It's almost like there's a part of us, we desperately want to believe and find proof, but there also, I think, is a part of us that we reject it first. The skeptic in us kicks in first before we will even entertain the thought that it might be real. So that if something real did happen, the government could probably easily get away with covering up anything, because all they have to do is plant the rumor on social networking that it was a hoax. And that'll catch on virally like, crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's this proof right under our nose, and we all, like, you know, swept it under the rug, which is very frustrating.
I know.
Because the whole point of, like, the internet and social networking and cell phones was, oh my God, now we have the opportunity to get more pictures, more proof. You know, now when you see something in the sky, you can take a picture immediately. You don't have to go, oh my God, I got to run home, you know, and try to find my old camera hidden under the bed or whatever in the closet.
We wait for the film to get developed and all of that.
Yeah, oh yeah, remember that? Yeah, waiting like 3 days or 4. But yet we still don't have, with all these people watching and at the ready to take pictures, we still don't have definitive proof of anything. A ghost, an apparition, you know, a demon, an alien, a UFO, Bigfoot,
Loch Ness
Mothman,
Monster.
who knows? Poor Nessie, yeah. So it's just so odd. There's billions of people on this planet. We can't get, you know, that proof. Maybe we're not meant to.
Or maybe it's just not the right time. Maybe it'll unfold when it's supposed to.
And probably because if we did have a Bigfoot, we'd kill it. We'd dissect it. We'd go after its family and kill them and dissect them and put them on display and try to find ways to make money off of them. You know, I'm not saying we would, but there are people that will do that.
Right.
So maybe the Bigfoots of the world know that. These humans cannot be trusted. So, you know, lay low, guys. Don't get caught. I can't stand these shows like Hunting Bigfoot, and there was one that I know got it never got made, it never got put on the air because the point of it was supposed to be like a challenge to see who could kill a Bigfoot, and it was such an uprising. It's like, you have got to be kidding. That is disgusting.
I heard about
Seriously?
that. Wasn't it that skeptic guy that was doing that? David somebody?
Yeah, but
and he wanted to do it. Yeah, luckily it got kiboshed. It didn't happen. But I was disgusted with the whole idea. I'm like, no. What's going to end up happening is you're going to have this influx of people running through the woods, and they're going to end up shooting each other.
Yeah, now that's fine with me. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, it's like that's how we approach. You know, a completely new species, and it is. I think it is the human. You know, we're the conquerors, and but I couldn't even comprehend that you would look for something that its existence could change the world, and you would kill it because you want to be the big stud hunter that, you know, puts his foot on top of its chest. And, you know, like the trophy, look what I just killed. And I was really kind of nervous after, you know, this was going on for a while, that there would be a TV channel that would be pathetic enough to do it just for the money and the ratings. And I'm so glad that they didn't.
Yeah, me too.
You don't need to be hunting, killing anything. You know, get pictures, get some evidence. Ask it if it'll come on TV and do an interview, but, you know.
Exactly. We can get a female one. We'll bring her on Pair Devas.
Yeah.
Tell us all about her family.
Listen. Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? It would be like, woo, 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 when you have an interpreter. What she says. Oh, my God.
Oh, that's too funny. I'm looking at your list of books on Amazon, and it looks like the most recent one that you came out with was Demons, the Devil, and Fallen Angels.
Yeah, I have one coming next month, but that's on surviving a disaster, so totally different subject matter. But yeah, this one is the latest. And it was actually a book I never, ever would have chosen to write about, you know, on my own. It was every now and then, like some of the books that I've written, like 1111, The Time Prompt Phenomena, The Deja Vu Enigma, 2013, Enter Days Are New Beginning, This Book is from the Future, and this one were suggestions from the publisher, which is really, really cool because sometimes, especially with the paranormal, you feel like, well, everything's been written about. What could I possibly explore, you know, that hasn't been done to death? And what am I going to do that's new? So sometimes they'll come to you and say, you know what, try this angle and write about this. And so Visible Ink. This is my first book for them, and I'm now contracted to do 3 more, including the disaster books, so that'll be 5 books for them, and I love them. So they said, we're looking for sort of encyclopedic book on everything that you could possibly think of that has to do with the history of evil, the devil, demons, fallen angels. And I was like, oh, that's kind of creepy. Do I really want to do that? But I said yes, and Larry and I did it together. And the funny thing is when I first started doing the research and kind of figuring out where it was going to go, I talked to some people in the paranormal field that I really respect, and they kind of were like, you need to be careful because you're opening doors here that could be very dangerous. The energy, could really get to you, and you might experience a lot of computer issues, phone issues. So I kind of got really scared. Nothing happened at all except computer and phone issues every flippin' day. And that's why I always joke and say, it's the demons, it's the spirit and the wires, because whenever, I talk about this stuff, things would fail, computers would go down, lights would go off, what have you. But that was it. I never got possessed or hurt in any way.
No terrifying nightmares.
No, and thank God,
paralysis.
Because I am really, what do you call it, suggestible. I have nightmares over shoes, and I really was nervous because I've had nightmares very consistently since I was very young, and I never had any. Now, when I was awake at night, I would get a little nervous. I'd put the TV on because it's like, if there's a demon here, I at least want to see him coming, But I really didn't have that much trouble with it, despite all the warnings I got. And I think it's because really the approach to the information in the book is very respectful. It's very objective. It wasn't like me poo-pooing everything. And I don't know if that sort of scientific objective bent is what really kind of saved me, or the fact that I really didn't believe anything was going to happen because I'd written about stuff before and nothing ever happened. But, honestly got into some really dark places.
Well, yeah, I'm reading...
So, I don't know.
The rundown of the book, and there's 2 things that are popping out to me automatically, and there are 2 things that I've been studying and researching for the past few years. One is the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, fun, huh?
Do you feel like talking about that real quick?
Yeah, that was in the 90s. My friend Ron Patton, who's a conspiracy theorist, wrote a piece on that. I believe it started with the McMartin preschool arrests that were made, and supposedly these, teachers were involved in Satanism and child abuse, and it just really exploded. It was one of the first situations where something went viral without the internet and social networking. So throughout that time, there was a belief that there were cults and Satanist groups and Satan worshipers operating everywhere, and I remember a couple of serial killers that were operating at the time. They were part of satanic cults.
Well, I was going to bring up...
And then it just fizzled away.
Richard Ramirez. I think that Richard Ramirez was kind of really the leaping point of the Satanic Panic. Even though the Church of Satan opened, I think it was in 1966.
He was nuts. And he was one person that, like, Manson, I had studied Manson and his origins, and he has very similar origins to David Koresh. They both started out as failed musicians. They had huge egos. They were really into having younger women around them and what have you. And Manson was just crazy. He was just nuts. Mm-hmm. Ramirez, if you look in his eyes,
he downright
there was
evil.
Something going on there. He was a doorway to something. I could not look at his eyes when he was in court. He looked like his eyes were the gateways to hell.
I agree, yeah.
So, yeah. So, and I remember, the Geraldo show, and he did a documentary, and a lot of the satanic stuff that they talked about, though, it fizzled out. a lot of it was proved to have been just like copycats and people wanting attention. I think it's just a perfect example of another witch hysteria, like the witch craze, but a more modern one. Because, the Church of Satan, I've known a lot of people, and then when you bring in children, too, and you bring in daycares and, the possibility of sexual abuse to children and satanic ritual abuse, everybody freaks out. And all of a sudden, nobody cares about facts anymore because they're operating off of sheer emotion. And I think that's what happened. Some of the McMartin people were arrested. They were charged, but there were no convictions. I mean, that's what's really weird is they never found enough to really convict these people on. So, were they really abusing children in satanic rituals, or did somebody report something and it just took off and went viral? A lot of this was religious, sort of a evangelical backlash against, the freedom love in the 70s and 80s. And so anyway, Church of Satan, though, I've known many members, actually dated one for 9 months after my divorce. And they are not at all what people think they are. They're not child killers. They're not evil people. They, in fact, more than anyone, do not do evil things because they know of the karmic potential for karmic bad. Yeah, there you go. And they're really just hedonists. A lot of them are really into sex and drugs and hedonism and enjoying life and living for the moment, blah, blah, blah. And also they're into fighting establishment and authority. And that really, when you go back and you look at what Satan represented, Satan as the fallen angel, Satan as the adversary, Satan is the one who stood up to God and said, hey, you're not doing things the right way here. Boom, you're kicked out of heaven. So a lot of Satanists, the real Satanists, had nothing to do with child sacrifices or even animal sacrifices. It was all about fighting against the establishment and against authority. And the best way to do that was to overturn the teachings of the powerful Catholic Church. So all that kind of stuff was really interesting to discover. And so the Satanic Panic was like one example of, as well as the witch burnings, as well as the Inquisitions, anytime anybody challenges the established church, the established government, even if you will, you're going to get this kind of reaction. And they played on people's fear. These Satan worshipers are going to get your little children. They're going to do awful things to them. And, they play on your worst fears as a way to kind of bring you back into line of what they want you to believe in.
Yeah, a few years back, I interviewed one of the high-ranking members of the Church of Satan, and he explained their beliefs, and it's funny because I basically had the same description. I said, so you're basically hedonists with a conscience.
Yeah, it's boring. They're like boring.
And that's really what they are. I mean,
Yeah.
They might do things a little differently than someone that doesn't belong to the Church of Satan, but that doesn't mean that they're evil, wrong, or sacrificing children and drinking blood.
Right. And those extremists may exist, just like we have extremists in any religion. Even with that, you've got people that would take any excuse to, torture animals or commit crimes and hurt people. Those are extremists. Those are not Satanists. Those are not true members of the Temple of Set or any other of those organizations.
Right.
Those are a whole separate copycat extremists, call them what you will. And they're present in every religion. Even Hindu, Buddhism even has their extremists. So, and that's where the Satanic Panic, I think, got a lot of its power, was from that small extremist element that may have been out there killing black cats, and smearing their blood, whatever, just for kicks. And then, obviously that's Satan worshiping, and oh my God, they're trying to open a doorway to hell because they made a circle out of salt or something,
Right.
It's crazy.
And I also see that you mentioned key figures in history associated with demons and the devil, worshipping of dark forces, the lives of and this is the one that intrigues me the most, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, he was just kind of a fun guy.
Yes, I've been doing 3-4 years of research on Crowley now. So I'm interested. What's your take on Aleister Crowley?
I think that, okay, so this, you know how I actually heard about him the first time was when I was younger. I was a huge Led Zeppelin fan, huge. And Jimmy Page, the guitar player, worshipped Aleister Crowley to the point where he bought his home in, I think, Scotland.
Yep, I think it was Ireland. It was on the Ness where he started the oh Christ, what is that?
The Golden Dawn, or
the it's a ritual. I can't think of the title, but it takes like 2 months to complete. He didn't finish it. It'll come to me.
Okay. So yeah, it's almost
but Jimmy
like
Page bought that
alchemical
house. Also bought a bookstore so that he could publish Aleister Crowley's works.
Oh, how funny! Yeah. But here is a guy that he didn't really ever do anything awful. He just was sort of he was like a drug addict and very flamboyant, loved, very sexual. The one thing that he was, though, is he was very interested in almost the earliest origins of like metaphysical thinking, Solema, Kabbalah, things like that they were called a cult just because they were hidden knowledge, hidden arts. But he was not a Satan worshiper. He wasn't an animal killer. He was interested in black magic to the extent that if you don't, duality, if you don't embrace both sides of duality, you're only half complete in terms of power. And I know he was really into alchemy, and a lot of alchemical thinking is that you learn to embrace duality. Mm-hmm. I think he started the Golden Dawn.
Yeah.
The Ordo Templi Orientis. Yeah, he started a couple of secret societies. Then he kind of left or got kicked out because he was very disagreeable, and so a lot of those organizations ended up carrying on without him. But you know what? I mean, he was not an evil man, and yet because he sort of took on that a very mysterious occult persona. You mentioned the name Aleister Crowley. A lot of rock bands, even Black Sabbath, had songs about him and stuff. And oh my God, he was a devil worshiper. Oh no, I think he was a really good actor.
And really high.
And he also loved the media. Really loved the media and the attention. Just like Anton LaVey. I mean, they loved the media attention, and they loved being talked about. And
I think Aleister Crowley got kicked out of, I don't know if it was Ireland.
Yeah, which one?
But he got kicked out of one of the places he was staying and asked never to return. Oh, crumb. Now, I don't know why I'm having
I know. He's like
blonde moments. But what I really wanted to get to was, are you familiar with him conjuring the demon named Lamb?
I have never heard of that, no. Is this something he actually did or claimed he did?
Claimed he did. Drew a picture of Lamb. It's Lam. And Lamb, and now he drew this picture, I want to say it was in 1908. And it looks like a gray alien, but it's, wearing like a cloak. With a spike, not with a hood, but with like a spiked collar and a cape around. But it has a bulbous head and, big eyes, no nose.
Oh, let me look it up. I'm going to look it up. So he may have actually had contact with an alien, because, aliens and demons were often interchangeable.
Oh, well, and a lot of people, had theorized they're one and the same.
Yeah, well, think about during, the time that the Bible was written. Oh, here's some pictures. Oh, my God, yeah.
Right?
Oh, that's a trip. Well, think about, way back then, if you saw a little gray or reptilian, I don't know how many different types there are, and you don't have any kind of scientific reference for, there might be other planets out there that they come from, so they're alien, they're extraterrestrials, you would think they were either angels or demons or whatever is in the context of your religious beliefs, because that's all they had at the time. That was their science.
Absolutely. That was
pre-UFO Yeah,
right?
From other planets.
That could be the first documented gray right there.
Oh, that is a trip. Yeah, because it's got the little dots for nose, a little slit mouth. How trippy. I had never seen that. That is really cool.
Yeah, I thought it was very intriguing.
It's like, yeah, how did he know? Did he just make that up? And here's the thing. People say, oh, they could just be making these images up. But really, if they're all kind of reporting the same thing, and then there's images that go back to ancient Greece and Rome, and,
right.
In the Hindu religious texts, no, I don't think so. They're not making them up.
No. So the one last thing I wanted to touch on that book that caught my eye was the Slender Man.
Oh my gosh, there's a movie coming out, or did it come out and die already? I think it's coming out.
I think it's, or it might be out and dying.
Oh, I want to see it because I love this whole idea of what's called fake lore, which is folklore, but it's it's fake. Somebody made it up. And I know Nick Redfern wrote a book on Slender Man, which I haven't read yet, but I'm sure absolutely perfect and wonderful, as all his books are. So these guys that were on the internet, made up this entity for a site called Creepypasta, which my son was obsessed with when he was younger. He and his friends are always talking about creepypastas, and I'm like, what the hell is creepypasta? And he showed me, and, it's all these made-up stories that were meant to, like, who can out-scare you? And then people would read them, and they would rate them and leave comments. And Slender Man started out as what has now become known as fake lore that has been created and sent viral, by the internet or social networking or what have you. And there's another one called the Rake that is equally fascinating. So these are entities that were made up for fun, for stories, for entertainment, that then became so pervasive, people started sending in reports of actually seeing these entities. And they were serious. Mm-hmm. And, there was the stabbing a few years ago of the two teenage girls, and the one claimed that she was under the control of Slender Man. Now, was she just plain nuts? Or do things like this take on a life of their own? Become a
tulpa after there's so many people that are...
a thought form, right.
Yeah.
And the rake is like this sort of hunched over, almost looks like an alien, really skinny, tall, balding, creepy thing that's kind of hunched over with long claws. People were reporting them to the point where, they were sending in pictures, and a lot of the pictures were then found to be fake, but they were drawing. And, I think some of them obviously were hoaxes, but it got to the point where people believed that they were seeing these things. Now, they might have been seeing a deer, late at night, and they just couldn't quite make out what it was, and their imaginations took over. Or, if we want to go to the other extreme, that when something enters the viral consciousness of humanity, does it have the power to become physically manifested?
I believe yes.
I do too. Can't prove it, but is that not the creepiest thing ever? That you could think of, that something could go viral and infect the minds of enough people to become real.
Right. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you think, Marianne?
I have no idea what to think on that. If it doesn't exist, how can you really make it exist? But then again, at the same time, there are a lot of very weak-minded individuals out there who can be made to think almost anything. I don't know.
And it kind of speaks to the power of thought, because we know thought has an electrical charge. Mm-hmm. So if you have 12 million people, let's say, thinking the same thought, is that enough of an electromagnetic influence on, our environment, that it could actually create something or open a doorway for something to be? Those are the really creepy questions. Or is it just the power of our imaginations that we we believe these things are true, so we think that we're seeing them, but maybe we're not. Maybe we're seeing something completely normal and we're just, thinking that that's what we're seeing. I don't know, but it really is kind of creepy. When something like that gets so carried away. And I think a lot of UFO sightings have the power to do that, too.
Well, and on the flip side, I remember a few years ago I was listening to a popular paranormal radio show, and there was wildfires. It might have been California, it might have been another state. But he had asked all of the listeners at a specific day and time to concentrate for rain in the specific city and state where these wildfires were just ravaging.
Oh, yeah, right. Uh-huh.
And not only did the rain come, but it came pouring for days and days to where he got back on the air and said, now we need to stop the rain.
Yeah.
Because
okay, people, that's enough.
It started. Yeah, they're starting to flood. Like it. Not only did we succeed, but we kind of over succeeded because it's
right.
So, I mean, there is a positive aspect to this as well.
Yeah, and I know experiments have been done with the power of intention and having everybody focus on water molecules to create, certain water crystals or whatever. And they've been incredibly, shocking that we can do that there seems to be something to the collective mind.
Mm-hmm.
And again, because it's not something that you can see or hold in your hand, it's very hard for scientists to wrap their minds around it, pun intended, because it involves consciousness, which is like the last bastion of, knowledge that we have yet to really uncover. But what that, interestingly, like creepypastas they've lost a lot of their popularity because, people kind of, they move on to other things. They're into real horror movies, But, there's still kids that read that stuff. There's still people that, and we see this every day on Facebook and what have you. Somebody puts a fake news, a story up, or a fake so-and-so got eaten by an alligator, and before you know it, it's millions of people are commenting, oh my God, but nobody's ever really bothered to find out if it actually happened.
Uh-huh.
So that,
Bless you.
all of that energy involved in believing that and passing it on and talking about it, maybe it does take a form, a physical form.
I think it's...
But that is scary.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So now the second most recent book that you had came out July 24th, 2017, The Power of Archetypes, How to Use Universal Symbols to Understand Your Behavior and Reprogram Your Subconscious. And first of all, I'm wondering, what is an archetype?
An archetype is a universal model or mold or concept that sort of gives birth to all similar concepts. So, you can have the archetype of let's say a guardian, and from that archetype, all other hero types or protectors or guardian angels or, come from. So it's like a mold. It's like the blueprint for copycat things. It's kind of hard to explain. But let's say the archetype of the devil. Okay, so the devil archetype we all understand as being evil and destructive. But from that, you can talk about things like the anti-hero or the villain or the enemy in a story or the destructor, the destructive spirit. But that very base foundational mold or model is the archetype. There's archetypes of leaders, followers, judge, victims, martyrs, heroes, angels, demons. So they're very powerful universal symbols from which we sort of create all of the characters and aspects of our own personalities, too, because we all embody a lot of these archetypes.
And how does one figure out what their archetype is?
I think you can look at your life and kind of discern from what's going right and what's going wrong, what your behavioral patterns are, what you complain about the most, what you're good at. So, for example, complaining is such a powerful indicator of what archetypes are at work that you may want to change and get rid of. If you're always complaining that people take advantage of you, guess what? You're a victim. You're the victim archetype. If you're always complaining that, oh my God, I'm always the one that has to do everything, you're the martyr. Okay? If you're always complaining that Joe always gets to head up all the projects and, you're the follower. So whatever you complain about gives you a lot of information about what archetype is running your life that you need to change. You need to either abolish it, embrace it, but then kind of start tweaking it, because maybe you don't want to be a leader. You could be a follower, but you could be a conscious follower that has a little more power and self-control. Maybe you want to replace it completely. I'm sick of being the victim. I want to be the warrior. What do I need to do in my life to take myself out of victim mentality and into more of a warrior mentality? And then you just have to find things, ways. And in the book, there's lots of exercises, and I have a lot of contributions from people that work with archetypes of the chakras or what have you, and ways that you can do that. You can say, look, I'm really tired of being a martyr all the time. So what do I need to do? What do I need to change? What symbol do I need to embrace? I need to start walking around believing I'm a lion, that I have courage, that I'm proud, that I am not to be taken advantage of. And you just sort of act as if and embrace that new archetype until you become it.
Now, I am going to say this, and I try not to react right away. I took an online quiz.
Uh-oh.
I know, right?
We're already judging you, Marie.
What kind of pizza are you?
And I was told that my archetype is the innocent. Is that even an archetype?
It is. The child, the innocent, yeah. It doesn't have to be negative necessarily, unless it's something that is affecting your life negatively. So, for example, the innocent can be someone who sees the world through fresh new eyes and is always filled with awe and wonder, very childlike. Things so fresh and new, right?
Right.
But if you're always feeling weak and picked on and used and taken advantage of, and people say, oh, you're so naive to you all the time, that might indicate that you're a little too innocent and you need to become a little more worldly and understanding the ways of the world. I don't see you that way at all.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get your book, though, so that I can get this pegged down.
Yeah, because to me, the innocent that you represent is directly tied into your interests in the paranormal and things like that, in that you have a curiosity. Adults are generally not curious. Children are, right?
Right.
Jaded, cynical people are not open to things like the paranormal. An innocent child is, because an innocent child has not become cynical. So that can be a very positive thing, but it can also have some negative aspects.
Yeah, some of the negative things that you listed rang true for me, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the case. Even like a warrior, what could be negative about a warrior? Well, the thing is this, if you're always a warrior, you're probably exhausted. You're probably sick and tired of taking care of everybody. Every now and then you'd like somebody else to step up to the plate and fight a battle. As a warrior, you never have the opportunity to slow down and enjoy life, or, explore any other aspects of yourself that aren't all aggressive and proactive and out there and always fighting and battling. So there has to be a balance.
Yin yang.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, I spent years angry. I was so filled with anger and rage and bitter, and for things that had happened to me earlier in my life. And what I realized was that's an archetype right there, but the real archetype that I was expressing was victim. When you're a victim long enough, you start to really become angry and bitter and just hate everybody, because really what you're doing is projecting outward the loathing that you have for yourself. And that was really eye-opening for me to realize, oh my God, this is about me, not all the people I'm angry at.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I can't wait to get the book.
It was real different for me to write it, but it was something that I had been learning a lot about, working with archetypes and addictions, and I was working with alcoholics and addicts and ways of reframing who you are, learning to find different aspects of your personality that don't work for you and maybe never did, that you maybe never even chose for yourself, and how to replace them in such a deep, subconscious, symbolic way that you literally would become the person that you really have always wanted to be. For me, it's a work in progress. I'm still working on it, but yeah.
Yeah, because that's the blueprint of your life, right?
Well, it is, but think about from childhood, how many people take your blueprint and tell you where your bathroom is going to be and where your kitchen is going to go. Right. It's like a blueprint for a house, right? And you're like, wait a minute, this is my house. But by the time you become an adult, you are living in this house that you did not even build. And it's dismantling the archetypes that you embraced, maybe unwillingly, involuntarily, that were imposed upon you by parents or peers or teachers or society or church or, whatever, government. And going back to the foundation, I'm like, okay, what really resonates with me? And it is a lot of work, and it's hard work. And you have to be really honest with yourself. And then, you know what? I don't want to be this. This is not who I really am. I remember when that was imposed on me, and sometimes you will, sometimes you won't remember. But it's amazing how many people I know who live off of other people's archetypes that they just took on. They didn't even take them on consciously or willingly.
Right. So you're currently getting ready to launch your newest book. When is it coming out?
Okay, so I think it's in August. Either August or September, and it's called the Disaster Survival Manual. And again, it's a totally encyclopedic, everything you could possibly think about, every man-made or natural disaster on Earth, and how you can improve your chances of surviving. Because, I'm not going to tell people that they can survive a 5-mile wide asteroid impact, but, a lot of it's common sense, and a lot of it is stuff that people don't realize. Like, for example, last week, the Red Cross was talking, when all these volcanoes are erupting, so the Red Cross was on our local news telling people, and I love the Red Cross, but I felt like smacking them, telling people, for a major emergency, you need to have 3 days worth of water, food, whatever. No. Now, I am fully trained. I'm trained through the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA through a program called CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams. It's all over the country, free training, and it's totally comprehensive. And having been in many major earthquakes when I lived in LA, having been in wildfires here in San Diego, I can tell you that the new norm is 2 weeks minimum. And the reason being that when infrastructure goes down, there is no way that food and water is going to be delivered to your grocery store within 3 days.
It's impossible.
So if it's a minor power outage, a small disaster, you're okay with 3 days worth of water or food. If it's a major emergency, Food you could get away with less because we can survive for weeks without food. Water, no.
Right.
You better have at least 2 weeks worth of water per person in case bridges and highways or a port is closed down where cargo comes through. There's no way for goods to get into your local stores. Those shelves are going to be empty, and anybody who has water is going to price gouge. And during one of the major earthquakes in LA that I lived through, my husband and I went to try to find water, and the local 7-Eleven was selling a gallon of water for over $20.
Mm-hmm.
So just everything that, you could possibly think of is in this book. And
No.
I'm really big on this stuff because I'm a single mom, and my son was young. When he was young, he has a disability, and so it always really scared me that if something happened, and it's just me and him, what the heck do I do? So a lot of my desire to write that book and the training that I got was from that.
Now, when did you get your CERT training and all of your trainings? Was it before or after you became an amateur radio operator?
So my training actually began in the late 80s through the 90s. When I worked at Warner Brothers Records in Los Angeles, they had a program for their employees because they were very, very much into earthquake preparedness at that company, including Warner Films, because we were on their lot. So they had a program with Burbank Fire and Police Departments that you could, take a day off of work once a month and go get training, and I signed up immediately. So that's where I got my first training, was through Burbank Police and Fire. Everything, triage, being lowered out of helicopters into burning buildings, and just everything you could think of. Assessment, building assessment, damage assessment. Then when I moved to San Diego, I found out about CERT, and I joined. I've been a member for 7 years, and it's incredibly comprehensive training. And once you are fully trained, you get your ID, and you get your bug-out bags and your first aid kits and all your equipment that is yours to keep. You have to go to 4 trainings a year. You go to drills. We have county-wide drills, statewide drills, national drills. I've done active shooter, terrorism, nuclear bomb, fire, you name it. So one of the big things here in San Diego, and especially where I live, is getting as many people ham radio operative as possible, because in a major emergency, cell phones will be useless. Mm-hmm. And there has to be a way to communicate, whether we're communicating with family or other, CERT people or first responders. That is the only way in a major emergency people can communicate. So I studied, took my test, passed 100%, got my license, KI6YES, my call sign, got my radio. I could use a lot more training, but, I have it. And most of the people in the city that I live in that are CERT are ham radio operative. So that's really good to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually am a operator as well. I'm KE8END.
Oh, yeah. What's your call sign? Woohoo! There you go.
Yeah. Kilo Echo 8, Echo November Victor.
Are you really active? Do you have like a home base station, or I just have a handheld?
We actually have a home station. We have started a group at the high school that I teach at, where we're getting our students operator licensed as well. I'm not as active as I would like to be, but yeah.
That is
right
awesome.
Now, right now, I have the general license, and
yeah.
I have to, at some point, move a little bit higher, because we do have one individual who did test, and they're thinking about maybe testing for a general. So for me to test them, I have to go and
you have to go higher. Yeah,
I have
that
to
is
get
so cool.
the highest one. Yeah, so
that you're teaching the students, because honestly, people are like, oh, ham radio, that's for like really old people, isn't it? Isn't that like CB radio? It's like, no, you don't understand.
Right.
You're gonna be glad. A few years ago, 2011, we had a massive power outage here in Arizona, Southern California. It was huge. And it lasted from early afternoon to, I think, like 2, 3 a.m. the next day. Everything. AM, FM radio was down. You know, all the tower, everything was affected by this complete grid screw-up. It ended up being human error. So where I lived at the time, there were a couple of former Marines, and they were ham radio. They had ham radio. So we were all sitting outside. The only way, as the night went on, and it got scarier and scarier, that we were able to get information and find out that it wasn't a terrorist attack, because it was like the day before September 11th. It was like the 10-year anniversary. So everybody's thinking, oh, my God, it's a terrorist attack. We were able to get the information and pass it on to other people. We were able to let people know all the gas stations are out, but there's, you know, some petrol available here or whatever, you know, food, whatever. People are passing out water bottles at the stadium, what have you, was because of ham radio. And it's honestly, I think it's worth it for people, especially people that live in more rural areas. And I think a lot of people are, you know, because they understand they're going to be cut off from news, even just news of what's going on.
Yeah, we had that whole same issue that you mentioned. Oh, that's old people stuff, you know, because we were very excited about it. My husband and I started the group at the school. He also works there, and well, we were excited about it, and we told the science person from the county, and we're like, guess what, we just started here, you know, we're gonna have this group. And he's like, really? That is so old-fashioned. And I'm like, not really, you know. So it's sometimes difficult to get across, but it is something that, especially in this day and age, it does become something that you might want to get into, because you're right, in an actual emergency, all the stuff that we've grown so accustomed to, it's going to be gone.
Yeah. Your TV, you know, power goes out. Your TV is out. Cell towers are down, you know, and at some point, even radio stations are not going to be able to broadcast. That really made me nervous when that happened. I thought, oh my God, where they lock them down? Ham radio, though, you've always got, you know, and people say, well, don't they use the big towers and the repeaters? But there's so many people, there's enough people that get the information relayed that you're always going to have communication. And in every major disaster, they always say that thanks to ham radio, they were able to communicate with people in outlying areas or tell people they were going to be evacuated in time and blah, blah, blah. And you would think at some point people would. But here's the thing. People are not going to do that if they're still not willing to save water, even 3 days worth. Oh, well, I'll do it next time I go to the store. You know what? Yeah, okay. Don't come knocking on my door because I have water. Right? It's always, well, I'll do it next time. I'll do it next month. Nothing's going to happen.
Right.
Oh, my God. So anyway, yeah, I'm a big, I love to talk about that stuff, and I love to just push it on people because they just don't understand.
Yeah.
$20 for a gallon of water, go for it. You know.
Well, I think it's despicable of a store to do that in a time of emergency.
Yeah, but they do. They do because they know
people will pay it.
You don't have the $20. Yeah, and that's another thing. You know, I never keep cash. And now I'm like, oh, I need to at least have like $40 in small bills in my wallet at all times. Well, and then I end up spending it. I go out to happy hour, right? And it's gone. And it's like, well, next time I go to the bank. And but honest to God, you get stuck in an emergency. You cannot use the ATM.
Right?
You know? Yeah, your credit card is not good.
It doesn't matter how much that water is. You ain't going to be able to buy it.
you either barter for it or you pay cash. And, sometimes a lot more cash than you really want to pay. So just those things that are so common sense that even me, even having written the book, sometimes I forget. When I go to the store, I should always buy a gallon of water. Stick it in the garage, stick it in the cabinet,
Rotate them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm in Seattle. You're in San Diego. We're in earthquake territory with the subduction Cascade. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
Cascade region. Woo!
Girl, I'm telling you, with all the stuff that's going on in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I'm getting concerned. I'm getting really concerned. But it's not slowing down. It's not stopping. It just keeps on erupting. I have an earthquake app on my phone that I've monitored daily for years, and I've never seen a state show up. And it shows earthquakes that are 3 or higher.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Hawaii is just popping off. It has not stopped since the initial eruption.
Yeah. And that can be your region next or mine,
We're all together. I mean,
tectonically connected. Yeah, it's all the ring of fire. We're all on that ring.
Yeah, if that whole thing unzips, it's going to be a freaking ride that we don't want to be on. I can tell you that. And I've lived here my entire life, so I've always raised with earthquake preparedness and earthquake drills at school and all of that. But I watched a show and I learned about the Cascadia subduction zone, and that scared the shit out of me. I mean, it truly scared the absolute crap out of me. Like, if that thing goes, they're talking about
it's massive.
Chunks of states going underwater in California and Washington.
Well, for so long, we down here in Southern California were the only focus until the people along the New Madrid in the Midwest realized, oh, wow, we're vulnerable as hell. And you guys, holy crap, not only do you have to deal with the known, but there may be, and I remember my dad wrote a book with me called Super Volcano. And right before he died, which was 2012, there was talk that there might be a supervolcanic caldera underneath Mount St. Helens. So in other words, you have a classical volcano.
Oh, gosh.
Possibly sitting on top of a caldera, which, supervolcanoes are always calderas. And how the whole... the Cascadian region is just so primed for 8s, 9s, earthquakes. Plus, you've got the volcanoes, and we don't have that down here. You guys have that sort of double whammy, and tsunamis and all kinds of crap. So because for a long time people were moving up to that area, thinking that they were getting away from any kind of major natural disaster. No.
They went the wrong way.
Yeah. But it's like, it could go off next week. It could go off 100 years from now or 1,000,000.
Right.
And so people will just automatically think, well, the chances are it's not going to happen in my lifetime. So I don't need to stock up on water and non-perishable foods and batteries and all that crap. Well, even Mount St. Helens, which was not a supervolcano, but look how awful and life-altering that eruption was.
Right.
Or if you guys had an 8-point earthquake, like I don't know when the last major quake was up there.
The Nisqually. It was the Nisqually, and I want to say about 24, which would have been about... I'm gonna say a fair 17 years ago.
What was the magnitude?
That was the biggest quake that I've ever been in. I want to say it was 5.7 or 6.2. I can look it up really quick.
And, I would imagine that area was not anywhere near as built up as it might be today.
Right.
I mean, I don't know your area, but so probably there was still quite a bit of damage. I mean, that's a big quake.
Oh, especially downtown, with the older buildings in downtown Seattle. Yeah, they crumbled down.
So imagine an 8.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I absolutely could not.
Not only that, but your infrastructure, your bridges, your highways, your roads in and out of safe zones. You can, if you're living more towards the coast, you're only going to be able to go 3 directions. You're not going to have the choice of that 4th direction. And it's a powder keg. So be prepared up there, please.
I just looked it up. It was in 2001, 6.8.
Oh my God, that's huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I said 17 years ago.
Depending on,
I nailed it.
Yeah.
What?
Wow. Is that the only big fault line though up there, or are there others
we have others. We have fault lines that are running directly under downtown Seattle. We're just full of fault lines.
Yeah. So people will say, "Oh, but there was that big one 17 years ago that probably took all the stress, and so we're fine."
And my advice to everybody out there: it's better safe than sorry.
Yeah.
Get your water, get your supplies, get your batteries, get your CB radio. I have an earthquake kit in my car. I have an earthquake kit at home, a bug out bag. Water for 2 weeks, food for 2 weeks. So it doesn't take a lot of money to put this stuff together. And
no, it doesn't.
You really will be happy that you have it if you need it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like when that does happen and you don't have it, then you end up having to, take from your neighbors. And I'm sure they really appreciate you not having been thoughtful enough to protect yourself. Now you're going to, ask them for help.
Right.
So, yeah.
Good times, Marie.
Yeah. Oh, my God. It's great how we can just go off on all these different subjects and, Oh, my God.
That's how me and Marianne roll. We just go through all the rabbit holes that the conversation takes us, right, Marianne?
Absolutely.
Yep, that's the best way to do it. Not to be all structured and formal. No, you can't talk about that. Shut up.
We are starting to run out of time. Can you remind everybody the title of your new book and when it's coming out?
Okay, so the Disaster Survival Guide will be out, I believe, the end of August. It'll be in bookstores and online and everything.
And then do you have any appearances that you're making anytime this year?
I have a couple here in San Diego that are local. I'm going to be talking about writing. I'll be teaching writing things. One's at the end of September. One is in January. And those will be I'll put them up on my website, which is mariedjones.com. And I have 3 books that I'm working on. The current one is called Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings.
Ooh.
And it's a lot of fun. Really fun.
That one sounds really good. So
real quick with that, is that where they're being haunted or they're doing the hauntings?
I think it's both.
Both. But it has to be a known person. It doesn't have to be a celebrity. It can be an athlete or, a politician. So, cases of people seeing the ghosts of the famous, but also famous people seeing ghosts, and then any kind of haunted location that, not people's houses, but that has some kind of notoriety, whether it's a historical building, a bar, a restaurant, a hotel, that kind of has a little bit of notoriety to it. So it's really fun to research. I had no idea that the ghost of Elvis shows up so many different places. I mean, honestly, that guy gets around, even in death. He's like everywhere.
Are we sure it's his ghost?
I know. See, there you go. That's the question.
Elvis lives. Elvis lives.
Elvis, the ghosts of Elvis impersonators.
You know, that is actually an option.
Yeah, I just thought of that. I got to put that in the book. But yeah, it's funny. Yeah, people say they saw his ghost in the Burger King in Nashville or whatever. It's like, okay. But he's also at the recording studio and at Graceland and here and here and here. So yeah, they could be seeing the impersonators.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine Elvis at a Burger King.
I know.
Even older Elvis.
Yeah, I think you would have somebody go there for him.
Right?
Yeah.
And what was the name of your website again? Just one more time so the listeners can get it.
It is the website is mariedjones.com.
And they can purchase your books off of your website as well as Amazon?
I don't have them for sale on the website, but they're on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. They should be in bookstores, even in libraries, too. So you don't have to actually buy one. And, like, if you have a local bookstore, ask them to order it. It doesn't cost any money, to order something, and they'll get it in for you.
I've had my bookstore do that for me a time or two already.
Yeah, we got to keep these bookstores in business so they don't end up like Toys R Us and, all these other companies going out of business.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Paradivas. We've had a wonderful conversation.
I had a blast.
Covered some epic topics.
We did, and if I decide to be regressed, I'm gonna do it on air on your show.
Okay, that's recorded,
awesome.
Right? Yes,
yeah. I'm gonna hold you to that.
Wouldn't that be cool? That might actually be cool.
Well, if you're scared to do it, I also have an experience that I haven't had a regression on. Maybe we should do it together.
Oh my God. That would be. I wonder if they can do it over the phone.
I don't know. We'll have to talk about it online.
Why not? Oh, that's a trip. That would be like an event.
It really would be.
Either that or, like I said, I'm coming out there to San Diego in November. You're there. We'll bring Marie. We're there, and we'll all meet up and do it there together.
There we go.
We can find somebody. That's kind of an interesting possibility.
Oh, Marino, you'll be hearing from us on this because I think that might. I think it's already going to happen now. It like kind of like a tulpa. We just said
down here that
now it's going to happen.
I know. I'll have to put the word out in my.
Actually, I can ask Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and I'm sure she can recommend someone.
Yeah. I know. I knew Yvonne Smith, but I don't know if she's doing it anymore. I think she's still around. Yeah, well, I would much prefer a recommendation other than just calling somebody and saying, do you do this?
Yeah, no.
I'd be like, what? Oh, that would be a hoot. Okay. All right, I'll do it.
All right, folks, will you...
You heard it here.
That's right.
I know.
We'll do it.
Oh, my God.
It's a few months away, so we've got some planning to do, but yeah, we'll try to make that happen.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Well, thanks again for coming on tonight. It was a fantastic discussion. We'd love to have you back even before the regression.
Absolutely. I absolutely love it. You guys are a blast.
And until the next episode, stay scared.
Just some scary movie. The one with the guy in the white mask who walks around and stalks babysitters.